Top 10 questions. So as I ask the question, I'll also announce who asked that question, and that person will get a prize. So here we go. So we have in total 10 questions, 3 for Cardano Foundation, 4 for IOHK, and 3 for EMURGO. And the first question is from Jack Steve, and that's for Hinrich Pfeifer from Cardano Foundation. What can we expect from the Cardano Foundation in 2020 and 2021?
First, thank you very much for the question. I think to answer this, I want to go back to say that we've already achieved quite a lot this year, also with the new council coming in and getting the foundation back on track with the new team we have, or with the extended team we're now having. We have the clear mission for the foundation and also the 5 objectives, and we continue to work on those topics. The community will be in the focus, as I mentioned earlier, with the phase 2, the reward phase. That's definitely a topic. We are also receiving a lot of requests from the community where they ask for support on projects or ideas. That's certainly also a topic we will work on. And we definitely want to grow the team to better serve the community, continue working on the memberships, on the legislation topics, on the setting the commercial standards topics, and clearly focus on the objectives that are defined for the foundation.
All right, thank you, Hinrich. And the second question is from Yevgeny S, and that's for input-output. Are you planning to bring any new and cool features for Cardano platform in 2020 which haven't been originally planned and announced?
Well, that's a good question. I like that.
It is. That's why it's an award-winning question.
Well, how about we just announce something right now? You guys want an announcement? Yeah, all right, yeah, okay. See, that woke the audience up, okay. So for a little while, we've been working with a shoe company, and my co-founder, he tends to wear those shoes. You guys know New Balance? Yeah, we're going to announce something on October 14th, but they're going to announce it. But you know, they asked us not to talk too much about it. But I will say that we're working on an authentication product with New Balance that will be deployed on the Cardano blockchain and be in market next year, hopefully early next year. So that's an example of something, and that's an example of real-life use case, and I'll be able to put it on my feet, so that's pretty cool. But in terms of new features and functionality, I think there are 2 that we really have to make sure get into the Cardano 2020 roadmap. One is the ability to embed metadata, DIDs, and deal with contingent settlement inside the system. These are 2 things that are just so important to comply with FATF regulations and to also allow us to have a more compelling experience with exchanges and regulated actors, and also will help us become the dominant platform for security tokens. So that's one dimension. The other thing is there's been a huge demand for Ethereum interoperability. You guys really want that, right? So we're thinking hard about what is the fastest, easiest, lowest risk way of adding that. It could be building a compiler for Solidity to Plutus. It could be taking Yella and plugging it into the blockchain and allowing both of them to live on the same chain. Or it could be a side chain. There's a lot of options there. This wasn't technically in the 2020 roadmap, but it's a high commercial priority to figure out how to have Ethereum interoperability. So I'd say those are the 2 dimensions that we have. But what's so exciting is we have commercial partners like EMURGO and the foundation, and all the time they come with us with exciting, interesting ideas, and these drive business and technical requirements for Cardano. And now that we're a bit more agile in our approach, we can add new features and functionality to Cardano very quickly.
Thank you. So that was a good answer and an announcement. Thank you, Charles. Question number 3 comes from Crypto Bonsai, and that's for EMURGO. Is Cardano aiming for price stability? This is because when it comes to volatility, like Bitcoin, it seems difficult to do on a daily basis?
Price stability? Not in particular, not at EMURGO level. Look, the idea of this market is that you have a vast number of people who hold ADA tokens and trade the ADA tokens across multiple exchanges, etc. This market is large. It's fairly deep. An activity, any initiative on our end in any shape or form to look at generating price stability and all is going to be quite futile, really. The best way that we can, shall we say, drive value to ADA holders is to do everything that all three organizations, entities have talked about throughout the entire day. Delivering on the development, delivering on initiatives with partners, delivering on initiatives that are ingrown from any one of our three entities, or supporting initiatives that are driven from the community and helping those succeed. That, from our side and our perspective, I think that's the best way that we can drive value to ADA holders, whether that translates to price stability or price appreciation or whatever else there is. Let the market decide that. I don't think that is something that, at least from us in EMURGO side, is an activity that we ought to be focused upon, right? This isn't a token price game or objective that we're in. We're in with an objective of delivering great technology that has immensely transformative power. And that's what we're focused on.
Thank you, Manmeet. Just as a reminder, Manmeet is also a vice chairperson at the Cardano Foundation, so he wears a dual hat. Question number 4 is from J Data, I believe that's how it's pronounced, and it is for IOHK. Could Cardano please provide a simplified explanation regarding the potential real-world applications of Cardano?
Want to take that, David, or should I?
Yeah, so let's give a few examples. One example of a case is certificates, and there's many kinds. You could think of marriage certificates, birth certificates, university degrees, any of the pieces of paper you get from government and other organizations. And so there's a big issue with those. There's a lot of forgery and lying in the world about those that causes issues for a lot of companies. And so the idea would be if you have that data, you have that signed on a blockchain, then that's validatable. And someone who wants to prove their credentials can provide that to someone and prove it. And so you don't get so much falsification. So that's an example of a kind of application that would work very well on Cardano. Another one that gets a lot of attention is supply chain. And by supply chain, that means the flow of goods and services through a chain either before or after a manufacturing effort. And so I'll give you an example of one. After a drug is produced, it then gets sent somewhere. And many drugs have temperature or humidity issues, and drugs also have potential falsification issues. So once the drug leaves the factory, you'd like to be able to validate the temperature, humidity conditions all the way from when it left the factory to maybe months or years later when it gets consumed. And so you'd want to know exactly where it was by potentially registering locations on the blockchain. You'd want to be able to register when it transfers from one entity to another, which is caring for it. Maybe a shipper hands it to a hospital, which is then gives it to a specific department to store. You'd maybe want to be able to validate that it was in a certain refrigerator at a certain temperature. And you'd want to be able to validate authenticity. And so all of those things, those events, can get stored on the blockchain so that they're permanent, immutable, verifiable, and providing a lot of value. Those are examples of substantial problems that industry has trouble solving today that blockchain can do very well.
Thank you. That, I think, was a good explanation and simple enough in a real-world case. So we're almost halfway there, and one thing that it's clear that we're constantly pushing the boundaries. Question number 5 from Rascarda number 3, and that's for EMURGO. It's a long one. Recently, Cardano seems to aim to introduce and promote its use in companies and local governments. What approach does Cardano take to achieve this? Do you think this is the right approach, and what does Cardano require from its investors and communities to achieve these goals?
So, yes, it is somewhat the right approach, or at least it is an integral part of what a right approach would be. Having adoption at scale, you can do it by having a lot of, small little bits and pieces, or small little projects, or young early stage companies where you're trying to grow this, and then each of these companies in turn has to go through a growth phase, a scaling phase, which will take several years to reach some level of scale that becomes substantial, that validates a lot in terms of what the technology is and what it promised and what it has delivered. Another way to get scale and to sort of kind of shortcut this process is to go and hit it at large points of entry, which are, for instance, government-level projects that can then in turn cover entire townships, cities, districts, nations even, and where you are able to then really deploy and test out the technology and its promise at a much larger scale that in turn goes and opens up the doors for the next large-scale project, right? So from that perspective, I think focusing on the government plays is really critical. Second, if I would refer back to what I said earlier in my short talk regarding regulation and legislation, there is a lot of misunderstanding and even just lack of knowledge and know-how amongst global legislators, politicians, and regulators who are the ones who make the decisions for our industry and for the growth of the industry. And if we're able to genuinely show to them specific projects that are, citywide, nationwide, that improve e-governance, improve transparency, improve the situation against corruption, et cetera, et cetera. If one is able to do that, then that will go a long way in one, educating those decision makers about what blockchain is and what it can or cannot do. And at the same time, it opens up their minds to other possibilities, other implementations that can be brought in, right? So I think hitting both of those at the same time is critical, which is what we're, as an ecosystem, trying to do. But certainly that government part is, I think, like a most important piece for driving this adoption. And I think all three entities are equally focused, and we're doing our bits to try and get there.
All right, thank you, Manmeet. And we go to our next question, question number 6, from Mitch MD. Either it's Mitch Medical Doctor or Mitch from Maryland. And this is for Cardano Foundation. How should the relationship be between the Cardano ecosystem and given public systems? It's a tough one.
That's a good question. So coming to the relationships within the ecosystem, I think it's at least from my perspective, a clear partnership. Where can I see the question? With regards to given public systems, I think it should also be a good relationship. As I said earlier today, we're exploring possible opportunities for partnerships, being a lot involved in the memberships in organizations that are dealing with legislative topics and so on. So we should be very open and keep an eye on it, and really see the developments there, and then decide what we do, right?
So to sum up, the relationship between our ecosystem and the public system will remain transparent as it is now, and we will push towards transparency even more and openness, right?
Right, exactly.
Perfect. So question number 7, and it is for EMURGO. It's from Scofflaw Pirate. Does the Cardano team see an opportunity to leverage the emerging STO functionally to eventually build an identity management apparatus and partner with an existing voting machine company? Shall I repeat that?
No, that's okay. I'm not so sure I understand the nature of the question. Leverage STO opportunity, yes, that's one thing. And then to do what?
Build an identity management apparatus and partner with an existing voting machine company.
Okay, I will try to answer this. Having an EID or a sovereign identity system, and that in turn linking to sort of security token offerings and security token tradings and those sort of regulated activities, yes, it certainly makes a lot of sense. It takes out a lot of the friction. Because these are regulated activities, you want to know who's buying what token, when, where, how, and what are they doing with it, how are they selling it, et cetera, et cetera. Some of the times you're talking about only accredited investors or a certain type of investor who can invest in some of these assets and so on. So to that extent, yes. Separately, having a sovereign ID solution that links to genuine transparency in voting. Now, what mechanism that would take, whether partnering with a voting machine manufacturer or something else, is an open question. But I genuinely am not sure how all three get linked together. But sovereign ID, EID as a integral sort of blockchain-based solution is certainly very critical, and it goes back to your point about credentials and verifying credentials. One can verify credentials, but it'd be great if you can also verify the identity of the person who's claiming those credentials, however that is, right? So that part is a core functionality in sort of e-governance that any jurisdiction would need and like to have, and then you can build a lot of services around it, whether it's trading in security tokens or voting or whatever have you.
All right, thank you. This was question number 7, and it was a tough one, I think. Question number 8 from J Gonch 1. That's for IOHK. In your wildest dreams, how will Cardano impact the world? I repeat the question. In your wildest dreams, how will Cardano impact the world?
You want the R-rated or the rated G?
PG-13.
I kid. You said wildest dreams. Come on, it gives me a lot of flexibility with that question. And this is why my media people don't have hair. So if we look into the future, 2025, 2030, 2040, my hope is for Cardano to become a financial operating system. So when we think about that, we think about things like assets, we think about transactions, and we think about stories. I want a large chunk of the world's assets to live in our ecosystem, on our software, on our protocol. I want a large chunk of the world commercial activity to be taking place on our platform. And I'd like for the stories about that commercial activity to be curated, preserved, and executed upon by our platform. That's wildest dreams, right? But if we pull that off, it means that all those things, those assets, those stories, those transactions live within our philosophy and our ethics. So we're immutable, we're transparent, we're auditable, things aren't getting reversed. Users have some semblance of control and privacy, and their identity is self-sovereign. These are the aspirations of the space. Now, everything the people on the stage do, we wake up every day and we work really hard to try to accomplish that. We go fight it out. But if we do accomplish it, I firmly believe that not only will the world be a better place, but it'll be a more egalitarian and fair place. And all 7 billion people will be using the same system, the same markets, but do not have to fear about existential risk. The system will be self-correcting, it'll be resilient, it'll be open, and no one controls it. and it evolves at a very rapid pace, and it's self-regulating at a very rapid pace, and it gets rid of bad actors. So that's my wildest dream. If we can tell the story of transactions and carry the world's assets and deliver that kind of vision to and future to everyone.
Thank you. I guess wildest dreams do sometimes will come true by 2030, we hope. Question number 9 from our Cardano Effect host, Ricky Mack, and this is for the Cardano Foundation, Hinrich Pfeifer. What is the plan to expand the Cardano Foundation's council to include members from additional countries?
Look, it's only around since end of last year, beginning of this year, since the new council member joined. And there's quite a lot to do currently for us. We need to also deliver on what we promised. And I think it was also mentioned earlier today that there will be, if we have the right time and the right person, obviously also with the right experiences and skills, then I think it's also time to add an additional member to the council.
All right, so I guess we have our answer. So at the right time, the foundation will add new members from additional countries. And this is the last question, question number 10 from Kern Mantle Sale, and that's for IOHK. Will there be a collection of proven to be secure smart contracts which one can select out of a library and modify? If yes, how will such a library be realized, curated, and kept secure?
That's an interesting question. We did one today. You guys see the Bulgarian escrow contract? We used an SMT solver on that. That's pretty good. It might even enter our library. Standards are the first layer. You have to actually have a reasonable discussion about, well, what are we even talking about? How do you classify an asset? How do you classify an identity? How do you classify cryptographic primitives within the system? And those subcomponents have to be built by either us or some good company, and the formal verification does take quite a bit of time there. It's a lot of effort and work. Then once you have those primitives, you can compose the primitives together to construct more sophisticated contracts and libraries. But it is an open question. It's not just do we have libraries or an SDK, but do we even need to write another DSL? Like, for example, let's find out maybe 30% of all the use of Cardano ends up being supply chain management. It may make sense to actually build a domain-specific language specifically for supply chains. And just by doing that, we can get so much more out of the tooling to verify that these contracts are correct. It's actually one of the reasons we created Marlowe. We said, well, this is mostly a financial system. It makes no sense to try to implement financial contracts in a general purpose programming language. Let's do it in a much simpler language, and then it's considerably easier to do what we did here today. Build a contract with somebody at a laptop live who's never looked at it before, and verify that that contract has no existential problem to it, like the DAO hacker or so forth. So that's one philosophy and approach. We do have a formal methods group, and we've invested a lot of time, effort, and money into it, and there certainly are emerging formal methods techniques which may be lighter weight and sufficiently good for most developers. But it's important to understand that there's no proven magic behind these things. Even if you have a specification, you have code, you've proven by simulation with the code, it's only as good as the specification, and second, it does not protect you from fraud. For example, I can have the world's best formally verified lottery smart contract that always pays me every time the lottery goes in. It's working to spec, it's supposed to pay me, right? So I could do that, and so it's just a tool, model checking, property-based testing, a litany of these tools that exist, but you start with the conversation about the spec, the standard. That's number one, and then you kind of work your way through that, and then you segregate stuff that is really, really bad for everybody if you get it wrong. That's the crypto, from the stuff that is a personal battle if you get it wrong. That's your particular flavor of that implementation. And then for the stuff that's universal, that's where you apply the heaviest tooling to. For example, Microsoft's doing great work with Project Everest and F-star, trying to rewrite TLS to be formally verified. And some projects are even using that part of the stack. And there's some merit to that work, and it's good stuff. And certain parts of our system, like UTXO counting, for example, we wrote very extensive formal specifications for that, because if we got that wrong, that's really, really bad for everybody in the entire ecosystem. But it's going to be a long-term effort to build these libraries. Now, there was also a question about curation of, well, who else is going to build them? How will we curate them? How will we evolve them? And that's another interesting open question. It would be really interesting to see if the treasury system could be used in tandem for questions of priorities. For example, upgrading of libraries. So it may be the case 3, 4, 5 years in the future, as people are building that pie of where to spend Cardano's money, that there's a group of people who are formal methods experts, not necessarily even IOHK, but it could be Gawa or some company, that show up and say, boy, we'd love to go and upgrade the standard library that you guys have for this particular language and verify that everything's right and add a lot of capabilities and functionality to it. Okay? And then the community will have to sit down, and the people who are proposing that will have to make a case of why that would add value to the ecosystem. And that's probably a decentralized governance feature, right? So some of it comes from use cases, some of it comes from segregation of universals versus particulars, and some of it will come from financial interests and people making cool, interesting proposals. And it's also a multi-model approach where you don't just try one formal methods technique. Even in our own company, we have many different techniques. We use Idris and Agda, COC, K. We've written things now. We're starting in TLA plus. We're using Isabel for certain components. So there's a polyglot nature to what we do, and each and every one of these is just one of a very specific type of surgical tool to solve particular problems.
Thank you. So as we finished all our 10 questions, I would like each of our AMA participants to say a few closing remarks, and I would like to start with David Esser of IOHK.
Well, let's see. I'm going to go back to that wild dreaming big, because that was fun. And so loved Charles' dream, and would add to that, I would love to see the sort of main functions we tend to use in the world today of shopping, social interaction, and search eventually have decentralized versions so that data and commerce and search are not controlled by large entities.
Thank you, David. Manmeet?
Look, not much more to add really, but here's what I'm excited for. 2 years of massive effort from everybody in this ecosystem. I think the third year, I'm sure of it, the third year is the one where we're going to really start reaping the fruits of all this labor, dedication, hard effort. From everything, where we stand at EMURGO, I am deeply excited about what's going to be coming in this third year of ours, and I'm looking forward to everybody participating in that. Thank you.
Hinrich?
I'm really looking forward to the upcoming years and the developments, and especially with the community topics. Really looking forward to work together also with you in the community.
And Charles?
I'm really looking forward to see what you guys build. How about that? We built Plutus, we built Marlowe, we've done all this damn stuff. I just want to see stuff coming in from the other direction, and we're almost at a point where that's possible, and it's really magical. When I was working on Ethereum, there was never a conversation we had about CryptoKitties. It didn't come up because it didn't exist, right? But then it came up, and we're like, wow, that's really cool. Some sort of network where you can buy digital cats and breed them on a decentralized application is crashing the entire Ethereum network. Wow. That's just like, you can't make this stuff up, right? So that's what excites me the most. It's so energizing, it's so cool, and every now and then you see things that really just make you get a double take. And sometimes you just get surprised. Like, I had no idea about the coffee machine. Yeah, no one told me. I just showed up, and I can use ADA to buy coffee now. That's really cool. Now, somebody's going to put that in vending machines all throughout Japan. You know that's going to happen. Manmeet. He'll make it happen. But yeah, it could happen with food, right? And then somebody's going to build a voting system, and there's going to be some weird stuff that's coming. And it's going to be wacky and fun and crazy, and that's what made crypto so much fun. When I signed up way in the early days, guys, there was no money. We had to come up with bizarre notions to entertain ourselves. In the early days of Cardano, EMURGO pulled a publicity stunt where they had people in panda suits running around. That was a hell of a lot of fun. I think Keisha can Google some of those images one of these days. We had a whole army of pandas run by. And you know, these community things are what keep things so exciting. So that's what I'm looking forward to. You can start building stuff, so damn it, go build stuff. And let's do it together and have a lot of fun.
Thank you. So we are about, thank you guys.